LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the very sad September 20th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've picked out this week the best, most newsworthy clips, 15 best, most newsworthy clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be an informative media criticism and political commentary show for you all tonight. You can see the clip list for my 15 clips down in the video description. I put a link. You can read my notes, figure out who's talking in each of the clips, what the subject is. Most of the clips are on the main topic, the RBG, death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a civil liberties icon. You know, I'm an ACLU activist, an ACLU superfan. All the opinions I express are my own. I don't speak for the ACLU, but I've done a lot of work, spent a lot of time, money, and effort over many years supporting the ACLU, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg was the general counsel at the ACLU for a period of time. She started the ACLU Women's Rights Project. So she was an ACLU icon. She was a feminist icon. She was a civil liberties icon. She was a cultural icon. You know, the whole notorious RBG phenomenon. And you saw, multiple times, I showed Kate McKinnon doing her notorious RBG impression on Saturday Night Live. That isn't normal for a Supreme Court justice, so that in some ways makes her special, I guess. But I'm going to start the topic of RIP RBG with some news summaries, followed by several Republicans getting cross-examined on the corporate news media shows this morning about the huge Republican hypocrisy between their position on Obama nominating Merrick Garland in March of 2016. What is that, like 8 months before the 2016 presidential election? But that was too close. But now, like less than 50 days before the 2020 election, all the Republicans are saying, oh, we have to get this pick through, and it's because the presidency and the Senate are in the the hands of the same political party. I'll critique that when we get to those clips. Then after that, I'll have actually a very cogent argument from Joe Biden in his speech that he gave today about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the Supreme Court. He talked about why it is he is not putting out a list of potential Supreme Court nominees like Trump did in 2016 and has done again. Why that is actually a way to politicize Supreme Court nominees. And then actually I'm going to end that topic with Nancy Pelosi talking to George Stephanopoulos on ABC's This Week, where she doesn't rule out the possibility of another impeachment of Donald Trump as a way to delay him from getting his Supreme Court nominee through. And that's actually not a completely crazy idea, as I'll discuss when I get to that topic. But then I'm also going to finish the show with, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is one very consequential death, but probably the biggest story, even though it wasn't the most covered story because of the death of RBG, the biggest story is that the number of deaths in the United States have surpassed 200,000 from COVID-19, the coronavirus. And I'm going to show you a couple news summaries on that, and then a very interesting critique of the U.S. response to COVID-19 from none other than Bill Gates. That'll be the final clip I show you in that second topic, the coronavirus crisis update. But before I get to all those news summaries, newsmaker clips, and that coronavirus topic, I almost didn't have political comedy to start the show tonight because it's so sad that Ruth Bader Ginsburg died so close to just that she died, even though she was 87, wasn't a big surprise to anybody. She had suffered multiple types of cancer, metastatic cancer. Some of those cancers can be really painful. So, at 87, she lived a long, full life, and I guess you can't be sad that she's not suffering anymore, but it's a great loss for, like I said, for feminism, for ACLU fans like me. And anyway, the political comedy clip I decided to show you does start with a great tribute to Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It's Michael Moore over on MSNBC on Weekends with Alex Witt, which is the show that comes after AM Joy that I usually watch some. And I was watching this also because that's where I got my clip of Joe Biden that I'll show you later. But this is Michael Moore starting off with a tribute to the Ruth Bader Ginsburg's, first big request 50 years ago, and then her final wish, which was covered on multiple news shows, that apparently one of her like deathbed request was that they wait until after the presidential election to nominate her replacement. Of course, she doesn't get to decide. But anyway, Michael Moore gives a great tribute to her first request from 50 years ago, and then her final request. And then there's actually a little joke at the end that, it's a bittersweet joke, I think, that I thought was appropriate for the somber feeling of this weekend, and I will talk about that a little more with you after we watch that clip together over here.
That Ruth Bader Ginsburg made two very important requests in her career. 50 years ago, 50 years ago at the beginning, when she first stood in front of the Supreme Court as a lawyer on a gender discrimination case, she said, I have one request here, and that is not to ask favor for my gender. It is simply to ask our brethren, men, to please take your feet off our necks.
Yep.
That was a request 50 years ago. Her request this week, just before she died, was to say, please, my fervent wish is that I not be replaced until we have a new president, whoever the president is on November 3rd, that when that president takes office, that is who should replace me. That was her last and only request. Mm-hmm. We need to honor this last request of hers. We all need to take a pledge to do that. And especially men, because we're not affected personally by Roe v. Wade. So it's even more incumbent upon us to stand up and speak up for women's rights and to keep the grubby hands of the Republican Party and the Christian right off the bodies of women who have their own right to decide what they want to do. I think that is just so crucial right now. We haven't honored her first request yet from 50 years ago. We still haven't taken our feet off women's necks. That's why they're so anxious to get in there right now and get this justice, this right-winger in there and get rid of Roe v. Wade, because that's what they want.
Yeah. Keep
the feet on the necks of women. And whether it's women still aren't paid the same as men. We still don't have an equal rights amendment. Can you believe that? The only democracy on the planet that doesn't have some form of law or constitutional writing that says women are equal to men. We still don't have that. So we have to honor her first request. We need to honor this second request. And people who are watching this, you do have power. Don't think that, Trump, they always win, these Republicans. They do win a lot because they're good. They're good at what they do. Mm-hmm. They are relentless. They are relentless. We need to be relentless. Or as I saw one protester sign in front of the Supreme Court there today, it said, we must now be ruthless because we are without Ruth. So now we must be ruthless.
Yeah.
We must do what she wants us to do.
Michael, I want to get granular.
So what do you think? Is that the lesson here, that Democrats now must be ruthless because we are without Ruth? And By the way, I wanted to thank my Super Chat contributors that I've gotten so far during the show. I actually got several because I posted the notice of the show early. I got Colin Baker, Elizabeth Keenan, Chrismer and Dave all contributed Super Chat like hours before the live stream started. Then I see Sinful Solutions also contributed RIP, the notorious RBG. And then Matthew just asked, do you think it was selfish for RBG not to retire in 2009 when she was just 76 years old and in poor health? Well, I don't know. I think a lot of what she did was inspirational. 2009, that was at the very beginning of Obama's 8 years. In 2009, that would have deprived us of 11 more years of RBG. She wasn't even the notorious RBG in 2009, I don't think. So, maybe you could make that case that she should have retired in like 2014 or 15 but even then, or maybe when there was, I guess 2009, because that's when there was a Democratic Senate, and this whole like Senate and presidency of the same party is going to come up in this bogus argument you're going to hear from Republicans. But in terms of the question of how Democrats can be ruthless, what power can they wield when they have 47 votes in the Senate compared to the Republicans' 53? It's all like real political power, raw political power that's going to come up in several clips. But what can Democrats do? Well, they have several things that they can do, especially if they win the Senate and the presidency in the election. One of the things I've talked about is increasing the number of Supreme Court justices. If you have your ACLU Constitution or any Constitution handy, you can look at Article 3 where it says that it doesn't, nowhere in the Constitution does it set the number of Supreme Court justices. All it takes is the Congress to pass a law to change that number and then the president to sign that law. And especially if the Democrats get rid of the filibuster, and that's another thing I've talked about over the last several months, in addition to my support of the idea of increasing the number of Supreme Court justices. I have this idea of getting rid of the current Senate filibuster and replacing it with a small d Democratic filibuster. The way that works is that you start with the senators from the state with the lowest population. Wyoming, I think, has like 560,000 people. And so each senator from Wyoming gets one Wyoming population vote, and then every other senator gets votes in proportion to how many Wyomings they have in their state. So California has like 40 million people. That's like 20 Wyomings, that's 80 Wyomings, excuse me. 80, not quite, because Wyoming has a little bit more than 500,000 people, but and then you just use regular rounding rules where, like, if you have 1.49 Wyomings, you get one vote, and if you have 1.5 Wyomings, you get two votes. That's how you round up, right? Those are regular rounding rules, and then for the small d Democratic filibuster, it would take a majority of the votes of the senators who represent, 60% of U.S. population. You'd have to get like 60% of the U.S. population to overcome the Democratic filibuster, because the Senate is a anti-majoritarian institution. Given that, like, I'm going to show a clip later of Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming, based on his 560,000 people in his state, he gets just as many votes as Dianne Feinstein, representing 40 million Californians, and that's kind of ridiculous. So in terms of how Democrats could be ruthless, like Michael Moore was talking about, It's threatening and then following through on increasing the number of members of the Supreme Court, getting rid of the filibuster, or maybe changing it to something more democratic. And all of that just requires a majority vote. Doesn't require constitutional amendment, none of that. So I just wanted to talk about that before I get to these news summaries. I put them in order from, well, the first four from longest to shortest, and then after that comes the Fox News Sunday news summary, which isn't really journalism. It's a kind of on the pro-Republican, pro-Trump propaganda side, but I'll get to that when I get to clip number 6, if you're following along on my clip list. This is clip number 2, the Meet the Press news summary. It's a little light on COVID-19, but then several of the news programs did a COVID-19 segment later in the program. In fact, clip number 13 is Chuck Todd doing a brief look at both the grim milestone of over 200,000 cases, 200,000 U.S. COVID-19 deaths, and then also looking at some of the Trump hypocrisy, Trump versus CDC news that happened this week and then didn't get very heavily covered because of the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So that's clip 13. But here you see Chuck Todd doing what several of the news anchors did, talking about how Ruth Bader Ginsburg is just like the latest piece of shit in the shitstorm that is 2020. Well, they don't use those words, but you'll see that is kind of a theme of the news coverage, starting with NBC News' Meet the Press this morning, where I guess because Ruth Bader Ginsburg was Jewish and died on the Jewish New Year of Rosh Hashanah, and that's gotten so covered, Chuck Todd just says Happy Rosh Hashanah without even explaining what that means in the NBC News Meet the Press news summary over here.
Good Sunday morning and a happy Rosh Hashanah. In a year of crises, impeachment, a pandemic, social unrest, a collapsed economy, the death of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has now set off a ferocious political battle that could only add to a year of turmoil. Ginsburg, the second woman ever on the court, a powerful advocate for women's rights and an unlikely cultural icon, died Friday night. Days before her death, she dictated a statement to her granddaughter. My most fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed. She may not get that wish. Faced with a challenging political environment, both President Trump and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell seized the moment. The president moved to replace Ginsburg immediately, promising to nominate a woman this week. Leader McConnell quickly reversed his 2016 position, taken after Justice Antonin Scalia died in February, that any nominee named during a presidential campaign should await the results of the election. Putting out a statement Friday night saying, President Trump's nominee will receive a vote on the floor of the United States Senate. Minority Leader Chuck Schumer put out his own statement that was word for word what McConnell said in 2016. This vacancy should not be filled until we have a new president. There is so much at stake. Will this upend a presidential election where nothing yet has moved the numbers? What effect could this have on some close Senate races, particularly in Republican-leaning states? And do Senate Republicans even have the votes to confirm a nominee immediately? I'm going to be talking to Hillary Clinton in just a few minutes, but we're going to begin with NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams at the Supreme Court. And Pete.
And I don't have a Pete Williams clip. I don't have a Hillary Clinton clip. I don't have any Bill Clinton clips, even though Bill Clinton was on multiple news programs this morning, but I didn't decide that that was worth showing you. Like I said, I have multiple Republicans trying to deal with the hypocrisy from 2016 that you just saw Chuck Todd detail pretty well in that news summary. Also detailed pretty well in the ABC News This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary, where they also, I think, followed the theme I mentioned beforehand that, like, 2020 has been a total shitstorm, and this is the death of RBG is the latest piece of shit in the 2020 shitstorm. As you can see in this 80-second news summary from George Stephanopoulos on This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. Call it the year of chaos. The 2020 election has already seen it all. impeachment, a pandemic, economic turmoil, racial protests scarred at times by violence, and Friday night, the loss of an American giant, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. A champion of equality, she broke barriers as a law professor and advocate, achieving greatness, in the words of Supreme Court colleague David Souter, before she became a great justice. Outside the court where Ginsburg served for 27 years, admirers have been gathering to mourn her passing, prepare for the titanic political battle to come. Many carrying a simple sign: honor her wish. The request Ginsburg dictated to her granddaughter days before her death. My most fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed. But Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell made it clear Friday that he would schedule a vote on President Trump's nominee. And late Saturday, the president promised supporters in North Carolina that his pick is coming fast.
I will be putting forth a nominee next week. It will be a woman.
And that's where we begin this morning with the latest from our Washington team. Chief White House correspondent John Karl, senior congressional correspondent.
And there was good coverage, like after the NBC clip I showed. They had Pete Williams, but covering what's going on with the response to the death of RBG, and that's what you also get after that ABC clip that I'm not going to show. But basically, Trump said it's going to be a woman, and there are 2 or 3 women on Trump's short list that he's apparently going to nominate in the coming week. And I don't know, maybe I'll have time to do an extra live stream this week like I did last week when I realized I forgot to show you a clip of Bob Woodward that I had put in the wrong folder, so I didn't see it, and so I did a bonus live stream on Monday, although because it included a clip from CBS's 60 Minutes. Instead of, it was Face the Nation doing a preview of 60 Minutes, but 60 Minutes isn't a news show, it's like an entertainment show, so CBS gave me a copyright claim on that bonus Monday live stream I did, so that's the reward I get for giving that to you. But anyway, I've shown you NBC and ABC. They both showed you Republican hypocrisy. They both talked about Ruth Ginsburg's final wish, just to guilt you and guilt Republicans into not nominating anyone. And anyway, here's Jake Tapper also following in the same tradition, a little bit shorter than ABC, but the State of the Union this week is remembering Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I will talk about the rest of that clip after we watch it together over here.
Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is remembering an American icon. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is dead at the age of 87. She was only the second woman appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court. She spent her career fighting against discrimination on the basis of sex, becoming a hugely popular feminist figure later in life, affectionately called the notorious RBG. Now in death, her vacancy is already reshaping the presidential race and setting up an epic pre-election clash between parties on Capitol Hill, as many Senate Republicans make it clear that their 2016 call to let the voters, not then President Obama, decide who gets to fill an election year Supreme Court vacancy was not actually a principle, but rather a soundbite that is no longer operative now that a Republican is in the White House. According to NPR, Ginsburg told her granddaughter just a few days before her death, quote, my most fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed, unquote. But President Trump is wasting no time, announcing at a rally Saturday night that he intends to nominate a woman as his pick in the coming week. And joining me now, former President Bill Clinton, who appointed Ginsburg to the...
And like I said, Bill Clinton was on multiple shows, but nothing he said seemed important enough to take a clip and show you on my live stream. But down in the video description, you can see links to all the news shows that I'm taking my clips from. If you want to watch the full news shows, you can see what Bill Clinton said. And if you think I should have taken whatever, I just was never a big fan of Bill Clinton, even when he was president, and I was a registered Democrat. I got really sick of defending Bill Clinton. For those who have been watching my live stream for the last 7+ years, you know I wasn't even that big a fan of Hillary Clinton 4 years ago, although I voted for her. But I'm glad that the Clinton dynasty is not something I have to defend or try to defend just because I try to make good arguments for Democratic policies when the Clintons were in power. But sometimes it wasn't all that easy, so that's why, maybe that's my personal bias against the Clintons, so I didn't take any Bill Clinton clips. But I have one more news summary to show you before I get to the Fox News Sunday pro-Trump propaganda, the final news summary. I'm getting distracted because I've got Sandy whining right over here and Dash over there, just sitting there quietly. And I do have a bonus Dash and Sandy clip at the end for you, for the Dash and Sandy or Dandy fans out there. But before I get to any of that, I have to get through all the news clips, including the final actual journalistic news summary from CBS News' Face the Nation. This is Margaret Brennan doing a very brief news summary at the beginning of the program that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. There has been yet another seismic shift in the 2020 presidential campaign, and this one has ramifications that could last for generations. The vacancy left by the death of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has already become a brutal political battle as mourners came out in cities across the country to honor her despite the pandemic. The largest crowds included her home state of New York and at the Supreme Court here in Washington. We begin our coverage this morning with CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford, who is in Morgan County, Alabama. Good morning to you, Jan.
And as with the other news summaries, I'm not going to keep playing the clip when they get to their legal analysts. I'm going to do my own legal analysis since I am an actual lawyer and I'm someone who has read the Constitution of the United States. So I know, like I said earlier, what the powers of the Congress and the presidency and the Supreme Court are. But like I said, that was the shortest news summary. The one thing I'll say about Face the Nation is they actually had the longest coverage of coronavirus. That's clip number 14. I'll be showing you near the end of the show, but clip number 6 is coming up next if you're following along on the clip list at the link down in the video description. This is the final news summary, but as I've often said, you can read this book over here, The Loudest Voice in the Room by Gabriel Sherman, and you'll find out that Fox News was created to be a propaganda arm of the Republican Party, and that's pretty much what it's done. And that doesn't mean no one who works there ever, incidentally commits an act of journalism. And I will show sort of some incidental journalism from Chris Wallace later, especially clip number 15 with Bill Gates, and a little bit with the clip after next with Senator Tom Cotton. But in this next clip, you'll see Chris Wallace do a brief introduction about, the stakes in the election are now higher because of the death of RBG. And then he hands it over to David Spunt, who really downplays Republican hypocrisy. You'll see he mentions Merrick Garland, but never really juxtaposes what Mitch McConnell is saying now to what he said in 2016, like you saw in the previous clips. And anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch this longest but most biased of the news summaries together over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. With 6 weeks till Election Day, the stakes got just a whole lot higher. The death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg leaves a vacancy on the Supreme Court and adds a big issue to the race for the White House. President Trump says he will nominate a new justice, a chance to create a solid 6-3 conservative majority on the court. But Democrats are crying foul, saying voters should get a say, electing a president and a new Senate before a justice is named to the court. In a moment, we'll talk with two key players in this fight, Republican Senator Tom Cotton and Democratic Senator Chris Coons. But first, let's bring in David Spunt at the Supreme Court with what looks to be a bitter nomination fight in the final days of the campaign. David.
Hi, Chris. Mourners began coming to the steps of the Supreme Court Friday evening to honor the second woman to sit on the high court. The president is pushing hard to fill a third woman on the high court as soon as possible.
I will be putting forth a nominee next week. It will be a woman.
President Trump making it clear a battle over the future of the Supreme Court is underway. Several thousand paid respects by candlelight to 87-year-old Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a champion of women's rights.
I, Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Across the street from the court, the battle to fill her seat is just beginning. President Trump's nominee will receive a vote on the floor of the United States Senate. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said in a statement, a single sentence giving progressives heartburn. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer telling Democrats in a caucus call, if Leader McConnell and Senate Republicans move forward with this, then nothing is off the table for next year. In 2016, following the death of Justice Antonin Scalia, then President Barack Obama nominated Judge Merrick Garland for the High Court, but McConnell denied Garland a hearing. The Senate Majority Leader, now fending off calls of hypocrisy, says this time is different. Since the 1880s, no Senate has confirmed an opposite party president's Supreme Court nominee in a presidential election year, he said in a statement. Former Vice President Joe Biden now fighting for the president and Senate elected in November to choose the new justice.
I should do this with full consideration, and that is my hope and expectation what will happen.
The court is still in its summer recess. The next term begins 2 weeks from tomorrow. Chris?
David Spunt reporting from the Supreme Court. David, thank you.
So you notice there in David Spunt's report that he showed what McConnell said on Saturday as his current rationale for putting the Supreme Court justice nomination up for a vote in the Senate, but they never juxtapose it with what he said back in 2016, and they talked about what Chuck Schumer said, but Chuck Schumer tweeted identically what McConnell said back in 2016, and that wasn't reported by Fox News. So that was pretty problematic, biased news coverage from Fox News Sunday, one of the supposedly straight news programs on the Fox News Fox News channel, news in quotes. But this next clip shows how Chris Wallace can do some good cross-examination, and that's really important since he's hosting the first presidential debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump on September 29th, and hopefully somewhere between September 29th and October 1st, I should be able to do some sort of live clip roundup after that first debate. So you'll see some of Chris Wallace's cross-examination skills in this next clip, but he also lets Tom Cotton get away with this really bogus argument. I mean, at one point he kind of says, well, you're framing the 2018 election in a certain way, but doesn't really point out that Tom Cotton says, well, the Senate has a mandate to endorse Trump's Supreme Court nominees because we gained seats in 2018, but the Senate electoral map was really favorable to Republicans in 2018. There were many more Democrats, vulnerable Democrats, up for election than there were Republicans. Actually, 2020, it's just the opposite. And that's why Republicans are, it's pretty close, but I think it's more likely than not that the Republicans will lose the Senate in 2020, depending on what happens in the next, 46 days. But anyway, here is Chris Wallace cross-examining Republican Senator Tom Cotton about his hypocrisy. This is the first of the 3 Republican hypocrisy clips, how they've switched their positions between the Merrick Garland nomination in 2016 and now replacing Ruth Bader Ginsburg much closer to the election in 2020. And anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Back in 2016, after Justice Scalia died, President Obama named federal Judge Merrick Garland as his new nominee to the court. And as you well know, you were part of the Senate then, Senate Republicans blocked the choice of Garland. Here's what you said at that time.
In a few short months, we will have a new president and new senators who can consider the next justice with the full faith of the American people. Why would we cut off the national debate about this next justice? Why would we squelch the voice of the people? Why would we deny the voters a chance to weigh in on the makeup of the Supreme Court?
Now, Garland was nominated 9 months before the election. And you were saying then, 9 months before the election, it was wrong to deny voters a chance to weigh in. So if it was wrong then, 9 months before the election, why is it okay now, 6 weeks before the election?
So, Chris, in 2014, the American people elected a Republican majority of the Senate to put the brakes on President Obama's judicial nominations. In 2018, we had a referendum on this question. Just a month before the 2018 midterms, we had the vote on Justice Kavanaugh. There could not have been a clearer mandate because the American people didn't just re-elect Republicans, they expanded our majority. They defeated 4 Democratic senators who voted against Justice Kavanaugh. They re-elected the 1 Democratic senator who did vote for Justice Kavanaugh. So we have a clear mandate to perform our constitutional duty. That's what the Senate majority will do now. That's what we did back in 2016 as well.
You really don't think there is any hypocrisy at all in saying we need to give voters, because, I mean, you can parse the 2014 election, the 2018 election any way you want, but you stated a pretty firm principle in 2016 about Merrick Garland. It's wrong to deny voters a chance to weigh in. You don't see any hypocrisy between that position then and this position now?
Chris, the Senate majority is performing our constitutional duty and fulfilling the mandate that the voters gave us in 2016 and especially in 2018.
I just want to, I promise this is the last question on this particular subject. Let's do a thought experiment. You're a lawyer. You do hypotheticals, or you did when you were in law school. Let's assume if President Trump were to lose in the election 6 weeks from now, if the Senate were to change hands so that it went from Republicans to Democrats in a lame duck session with a president who'd been defeated and a Republican majority that was about to be out of office, some would say the lamest of lame duck sessions, are you saying you still think it would be proper to vote to confirm President Trump's nominee to the court?
Chris, as I said, we're going to move forward without delay, and there will be a vote on this nominee. But to the point, Donald Trump's going to win re-election, and I believe the Senate Republicans will win our majority back because the American people know that Donald Trump is going to put nominees up for the federal courts who will apply the law, not make the law. Joe Biden's not going to do that. Joe Biden still refuses to even identify who he might nominate. And Joe Biden and Senate candidates like Cal Cunningham in North Carolina and Teresa Greenfield in Iowa need to put their cards on the table. They need to say what they would do in this kind of nomination.
Okay, let me ask you one other question about this.
And you see there that Tom Cotton is one of multiple Republicans who've called on Joe Biden to give his list of nominees. And if you're following along on the clip list, I put a link down in the video description to my clip list notes. It's clip number 10 coming up in 3 more clips where Joe Biden completely, cogently refutes that argument that he should be giving his list of nominees. But Tom Cotton also, I think, used this 29 previous cases precedent, 29 previous precedents of times when there's been a Supreme Court vacancy in an election year, and Chris Wallace did an okay job of, journalistically cross-examining him, though he let him get away with that whole, 2018 mandate argument that I pointed out before I showed the clip is pretty bogus, because the 2018 Senate election map really favored Republicans, just like 2020 favors Democrats in terms of who's up for re-election or where the open seats are. But the next clip I want to show is actually the best cross-examination, I think. Well, it's kind of a toss-up between Chuck Todd on NBC News' Meet the Press versus Jake Tapper on CNN's State of the Union. I guess Chuck Todd has the virtue of going on for a longer period of time. This is the longest clip I'm going to show you. It's like 6.5 minutes of Chuck Todd trying to get John Barrasso to admit he's a hypocrite based on what he said in 2016 and what he's saying now. And not just him, but other Republicans like Lindsey Graham. You'll see the infamous Lindsey Graham "use my words against me" clip here, and also in the Jake Tapper cross-examination of Marc Short, who's the chief of staff to Vice President Mike Pence. So those are the next 2 Republican hypocrites getting cross-examined by the corporate mainstream news media. And I think both of these anchors do a better job than Chris Wallace did in that last clip. And I'll talk about that a little more after you watch 6.5 minutes of Chuck Todd cross-examining John Barrasso, who, of course, every time he talks about the will of the people, is a total hypocrite, because he represents 560,000 people in Wyoming and gets the same power as Dianne Feinstein and Kamala Harris, representing like 40 million Californians. So his appeal to the voice of the people is ridiculous, and also his claim he's not a hypocrite, as I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that NBC News Meet the Press clip together from this morning over here.
Senator, I want to get into the politics. 4 years ago, you were emphatic on various ways you said it. You heard it in that list of clips. You would add on at different times, I want to give the American people a voice in this. Why don't you want to give the American people a voice this time?
Well, first, let's be very clear. If the shoe were on the other foot and the Democrats had the White House and the Senate, they would right now be trying to confirm another member of the Supreme Court.
You don't know that.
What we're proposing is completely consistent with the precedent. What happened in 2016, and let's go back, we were following the Joe Biden rule. Joe Biden was clear when he was chairman of the Judiciary Committee. And he said, when there is a Senate of one party and a White House of the other, and he said this to George Herbert Walker Bush, he said, if there's a vacancy in that final year, we will not confirm. And that's what we did with Merrick Garland. But 29 times, Chuck, there have been vacancies in the year of a presidential election. And if both the White House and the Senate are of the same party, they go forward with the confirmation.
So, you know, I have scoured all of these 2016 notes, looking for these footnotes that have been added now. You guys have this new explanation. Never once on the Senate floor, when election is just months away in 2016, you said that people should be allowed to consider possible Supreme Court nominees as one factor in deciding who they'll support for president. This shouldn't even really be controversial. Then you said this is not about the person, it's about the principle involved, and I want to give the American people a voice in this. Republicans have said there should not be a bitter political fight. We have called on the president to spare the country this fight. The best way to avoid the fight is to agree to let the people decide. Senator, these are your words. Not once did you say, oh, it depends on what party the Senate holds versus the party of the president. This just sounds like a power grab, pure and simple.
Well, it is the Biden rule, and this is the way, this is the precedent of the country. You haven't had
no Biden rule.
Garland, you haven't had since 1888, when a party of the Senate and the House and the White House were of different parties, that anyone was confirmed, and that was the situation with Merrick Garland. Chuck Schumer said the same thing at the end of George W. Bush's term, that if the vacancy occurred with the President Bush, a Republican in the White House, and the Democrats under Harry Reid and Chuck Schumer in charge of the Senate, that they would not confirm. But now when you have both the parties in the White House and the Senate, historically, the confirmation goes forward. And that's what's going to happen here. I'll tell you what's going to happen. The Senate's going to be back in session, and the president's going to make a nomination, I believe, this week.
Look, I get that. But, Senator, nobody in the Senate Republican Conference was arguing these fine footnote points that you and your other colleagues are arguing now. I want to play a clip for you from 2018 from Lindsey Graham. Take a listen.
If an opening comes in the last year of President Trump's term and the primary process has started, we'll wait to the next election. And I've got a pretty good chance of being the judiciary.
You're on the record.
Yeah.
All right.
Hold the tape.
Senator, I guess the question is, should viewers just not believe anything you're saying today, because whatever you're saying today will change depending on the politics of the moment?
Well, I can tell you what's going to happen, Chuck. For viewers who are watching, the president is going to make a nomination. I believe it's going to be this week. And Lindsey Graham, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, we will hold hearings, and there will be a vote on the floor of the United States Senate this year. The president has a list of 20 potential nominees. He's mentioned several of them last night. And I really do think that if the president really wanted to make a powerful, positive statement by coming forth with a woman nominee, there are many qualified women on his list, somebody who could then be a role model for future attorneys, for young women and young men looking into the law. I think that would be the right move for this president soon.
Senator, I want to just quote you back to yourself one more time. We have called on the president to spare the country this fight. The best way to avoid this fight, to agree to let the people decide. Give the people a voice. Why is it that this principle only matters when a Democrat is in the White House?
It's not that at all. If we did something different now, we would be breaking with the precedent that has long been established, that if the president and the Senate are of the same party, you move along with confirmation. But Chuck, let me just say this one thing, because you brought this up with Amy and Chuck Schumer last night. Look, Chuck Schumer has been very clear. The Democrats have been very clear. If they win the White House and the Senate, all bets are off. They are going to blow up the filibuster. They are going to use the nuclear option. They are going to stack the Supreme Court. They've talked about raising the number of members of the Supreme Court. So even though Ruth Bader Ginsburg said it's a bad idea, she said it would politicize the court, and she said 9 is the right number. You asked me if I believe it. The Democrats and Schumer have a war room. They have been at this for a long time. These are the promises that they have made, including stacking the Senate by making the District of Columbia. You asked the question.
Yeah, but you have no regrets that Senate Republicans are going to look like hypocrites 44 days before the election for just a complete flip-flop to the average American. I mean, I know you're trying to come up with these caveats. Nothing about it makes any sort of sense to the average person.
This is the consistent principle and policies that have been followed through the history of the United States when 29 vacancies occurred in years of presidential elections. We're going to be consistent with all of that. But you're right, there's an election coming up. Every Senate candidate and every senator speaks for himself or herself. As chairman of the conference, I have great respect for that. But each one is going to be called upon to make a decision and to, in their role as our advise and consent, the president is going to nominate, and we're going to vote this year, Chuck.
Senator Barrasso, Republican from Wyoming.
So, what do you think? I think that was actually a pretty competent cross-examination by Chuck Todd of Senator John Barrasso from Wyoming, trying to defend the hypocrisy of the Republican Party on the way they treated the Obama nomination of Merrick Garland versus the ramming through of a successor for Ruth Bader Ginsburg, apparently. And I know Chuck Todd doesn't have a lot of fans in my viewers. I don't know. There are, in fact, a lot of Chuck Todd haters out there, but maybe we should give him, you know, a little bit of kudos for that cross-examination, especially given that it's Rosh Hashanah. But you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. The final Republican cross-examination I want to show you is from Jake Tapper. I think he does a pretty good job, except he kind of accepts the Republican talking point that Biden should release a list of possible Supreme Court nominees. And in the clip after next, I'm going to show you Biden refuting that point. But before that, I want to show you Jake Tapper cross-examining the Chief of Staff for Vice President Mike Pence, trying to defend Republican trying to defend Republican hypocrisy, including that same Lindsey Graham clip from the last from the Meet the Press cross-examination of John Barrasso I just showed you, where Lindsey Graham says, you know, use my words against me. And here's Marc Short trying to make that argument against Jake Tapper in this clip.
Say that all this flip-flopping by Republicans on the issue of nominating a Supreme Court justice during an election year will only increase public cynicism. In 2016, then candidate Trump was asked if he was okay with President Obama nominating a replacement for Justice Antonin Scalia, who passed away. Here's what candidate Trump said then.
I think it's up to Mitch McConnell and everybody else to stop it. It's called delay, delay, delay.
So the Trump position for a Democratic president was delay, delay, delay. But for him, it's urgent to confirm someone now. How do you push back against the impression voters are going to have that there seems to be absolutely no principle at stake here? It's just about raw power.
Yeah, actually, Jake, it's a pretty easy historical precedent. Of those 29 I laid out for you, there are 19 of those vacancies that happened when the party in the Senate, the majority party, was the same party of the president. Of those 19, 9 out of 10 were confirmed before Election Day, and another 8 out of 9 after Election Day in the lame duck period, including John Marshall. Take the separate scenario in which the party in control in the Senate is a different party than the president. There are 10 such vacancies. Only 1 out of 10 was filled before Election Day. And you have to go back to the 1880s to find that example under Grover Cleveland's presidency. So actually, the historical precedent is pretty clear. When you have a party in power in the Senate whose job it is to advise and consent and confirm the president's nominee, it continually has shown historically that that is the job of the Senate, to confirm the president's nomination, and history shows it's the president's obligation to make a nomination. Mm-hmm. When you have a party in different power in the United States Senate, those nominations have not moved forward. And that's exactly what Leader McConnell did in 2016.
I take the point on the difference of power between the White House and the Senate, but a lot of Republicans weren't talking about that in 2016. They were talking about the principle of, we're so close to an election, let's let the voters decide. And it isn't just President Trump changing his tune on this. It's also virtually every Senate Republican. Take a listen to the man who is now the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Lindsey Graham, back in 2016.
If there's a Republican president in 2016 and a vacancy occurs in
the last year of the first term, you can say, Lindsey Graham said, let's let the next president, whoever it might be, make that nomination, and you could use my words against me, and you'd be absolutely right.
Graham doesn't care anymore. He says he's going to move forward with the president's nominee anyway. I guess the bigger question I have is there not a risk that this obvious hypocrisy may cost Republicans in competitive races their seats, being associated with it? Might you be putting, say, Senator Susan Collins or Senator Cory Gardner, who are in very tough re-election fights, at risk?
Jake, I reject the notion there's hypocrisy. As I said, the historical precedent is when your party's in power and the president nominates consistently, going back to George Washington, the party has continued to confirm those nominees. So I don't think there's hypocrisy. Regarding the politics of this, again, the people of America elected Donald Trump president in 2016 in large part because he was so transparent and put forward a list and say, here's who I would nominate. We still haven't seen a list from Joe Biden. We'd welcome a list from Joe Biden that would show the American people, if he's elected, here's who I would appoint to the Supreme Court. But as far as the politics of it, I think the American people wanted Donald Trump to be in a position to make these nominations, and it's his obligation to do so.
I would love to see a list from Joe Biden. I'd also love to see President Trump's tax returns, as long as we're talking about precedents along those lines.
You know, that's clever, Jake, but the reality is that we know that the president has gone through multiple financial disclosures that are more revealing than tax returns. That was an issue in 2016. The American people elected him in 2016. He'll continue to fill out those financial disclosures.
I'm glad you think it's clever. It's also just precedent. He's the first person since '76 who hasn't done it. But let's stick to this issue about Ginsburg and the Supreme Court vacancy. Do you want to vote before the election? Is that...
So, like I said before I showed the clip, I don't actually agree with Jake Tapper that, I would love to see Joe Biden's list for reasons that Joe Biden will explain in the next clip I'm going to show you. But the rest of it, I thought Jake Tapper did a pretty good job of cross-examining Marc Short on the hypocrisy of Republicans regarding their position in 2016 versus their position in 2020 on the power of presidents to nominate Supreme Court justices. And the whole thing about the 29 the precedents, 29 times in an election year that presidents have nominated Supreme Court justices, and in the times when the president and the Senate both were controlled by the same party, those nominees mostly went ahead, but when they were different parties, they didn't go ahead. Well, that's not only not an argument that the Republicans made in 2016, but the thing that I find so amusing about that argument is that it is so close to the analysis of critical race theory. That's something Trump has come out against in the last couple weeks, that critical race theory shouldn't be taught in our various federal government agencies. And critical race theory says that that law isn't about rights and principles. It's really about who is in power. That if you look at the decisions that are made by the Congress or by the Supreme Court, it's really about protecting the rights of people who are in power, and sometimes other people's rights get protected incidentally. If you read critical race theory about what happened in the 60s, where the rights of black people and free speech rights were protected by the Supreme Court, it's actually all about how we were in the middle of the Cold War, and we wanted to show, the Soviet Union was trying to tell black people that, they should revolt against the American government, kind of like what Russia is doing now and interfering with the presidential elections, trying to polarize the electorate and trying to get people, racial animosities to be increased to the maximum level, but if you follow critical race theory, it's really, like I said, it's that the law is meant to protect the powerful, the people who own the most, and sometimes incidentally they protect the rights of other people. And that's kind of that analysis you see about all the precedents where basically what all those Republicans were saying when they said, well, there are 29 times in presidential elections that the Senate and the presidency were controlled by the same party and they went ahead, but when there was a conflict between the president and the Senate in terms of the political party, they didn't go ahead. That means it's just raw power. If the president and the Senate are controlled by the same party, they do what they want. And if they aren't, then they wait for an election and the will of the people. It's all about who has the power. It's kind of, like I said, critical race theory advocated by Republicans. So that's kind of amusing. But one thing you saw several Republicans say in those last clips is that they wanted Biden to give his list of potential Supreme Court nominees. And even Jake Tapper said in that last clip he wants to see that list. But Joe Biden gave a speech on the death of RBG and the future of the Supreme Court, and I put a link to the whole speech at a link that links down in the video description. But here is Joe Biden explaining why he should not give that list of potential nominees. Three reasons why there is no Joe Biden list over here.
That includes this whole business of releasing a list of potential nominees that I would put forward. But now saying after Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away, they said Biden should release his list. It's no wonder the Trump campaign asked that I release the list only after she passed away. It's a game for them. It's a play to gin up emotions and anger. There's a reason why no presidential candidate other than Donald Trump has ever done such a thing. First, putting a judge's name on a list like that could influence that person's decision-making as a judge, and that would be wrong, or at least create the perception that it would have influence. Second, anyone put on a list like that under these circumstances will be subject to unrelenting political attacks, because any nominee I would select would not get a hearing until 2021 at the earliest. She would endure those attacks for months on end without being able to defend herself. And thirdly and finally, perhaps most importantly, if I win, I'll make my choice for the Supreme Court not based on a partisan election campaign, but on what prior presidents have done, Republican and Democrats, and I've served with many of them. Only after consulting Democrats and Republicans in the United States Senate and seeking their advice and asking for their consent. It says advise and consent the Senate. The president is the person who gets to name someone, propose. The Senate disposes. As everyone knows, I made it clear that my first choice for the Supreme Court will make history as the first African-American woman justice. But I'll consult with senators in both parties about that pick, as well as the legal and civil leaders in our country. In the end, the choice will be mine and mine alone, but I will consult. But it'll be the product of a process that restores our finest traditions, not the extension of one that's torn this country apart the last years. So let me conclude with this.
And like I said before I showed the clip, I think those are three very good reasons why Joe Biden isn't putting forth a list of possible Supreme Court nominees, and why it's one of the many norms that Trump has abolished, that we don't politicize Supreme Court nominees. I mean, that is something that's happened over many years, going, I guess, all the way back to the Robert Bork nomination, maybe. But anyway, I wanted to show that Joe Biden rebuttal to the claim you saw in multiple previous clips that he should put out his list of possible Supreme Court nominees, that even Jake Tapper in the previous clip seemed to approve of that possibility. But of course, Jake Tapper is a journalist, so he would love to see a list, even if that list isn't necessarily what is best for America's democracy. But can you hear Sandy whining right off camera? It's really distracting me. But anyway, I have two more clips on this topic I want to show you. First, Cory Booker, and then Nancy Pelosi talking about what Democrats can do to respond to this use of raw power by this Mitch McConnell, like totally contradicting what he said in 2016. And first, here's Cory Booker talking to Margaret Brennan, and he won't even entertain the idea of increasing the number of Supreme Court justices, or getting rid of the filibuster, or any of those other things I was talking about, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip from CBS News's Face the Nation this morning over here.
Going, despite that horn there in the background in Newark. Senator, the Democratic leader, Chuck Schumer, has said nothing's off the table if Republicans go through with this. He's talking about what happens next year. The progressives within your party, some of them are pushing to pack the court, to add more justices to the Supreme Court. Do you support expanding it?
Look, there's a double presumption in there that I just do not want people to lose focus on. Number one, well, we can still appeal, like
openly
we did in
called for by someone in your party.
I understand that, but let me tell you what this United States senator is openly calling for. Number one, letting your voices be heard now to appeal to the decency and honor of people who spoke what this process should be. And number two is this election. Unless we win the Senate back, unless we win the White House, all these questions are just hypothetical and moot. We need to focus on what is at hand. We are already begun voting in a number of United States. Early ballots are going out across this country. We need to win this election. Everything is on the line, and that should be, in my opinion, the focus right now.
All right. Senator Booker, thank you very much for your time and your reflection.
And so there you see Cory Booker, one of the progressive Democrats in the Senate, won't take a position in favor of increasing the number of Supreme Court justices or any of the other ways that Democrats could fight back. But the final clip in this topic about RBG, or RIP RBG, and how Democrats can respond to this Supreme Court vacancy, is this clip from Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi talking to George Stephanopoulos on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, where actually it's George Stephanopoulos who brings up this idea of Democrats impeaching either Donald Trump or Attorney General Bill Barr, because the thing is, impeachment under Senate rules get priority, so this is a way to make the Senate take up an issue that they're required to take up before the Supreme Court nominee. This is like a delaying tactic. And So Nancy Pelosi doesn't rule it out. She doesn't rule out any of the arrows in the quiver that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that final clip in the topic of R.I.P. RBG, the very sad topic for the live stream tonight over here.
And let me press you, though, on what happens. You said you want people to get out there and vote, but even that's no guarantee that the White House and Senate Republicans won't try to push through a Supreme Court nomination in a lame duck session, even if Joe Biden wins on November 3rd, even if Democrats pick up seats in the House and maybe even the Senate. So what can you do then? Some have mentioned the possibility, if they try to push through a nominee in a lame duck session, that you and the House could move to impeach President Trump or Attorney General Barr as a way of stalling and preventing the Senate from acting on this nomination.
Well, we have our options. We have arrows in our quiver that I'm not about to discuss right now. But the fact is, we have a big challenge in our country. This president has threatened to not even accept the results of the election with statements that he and his henchmen have made. So right now, our main goal, and I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg would want that to be, would be to protect the integrity of the election as we protect the American people from the coronavirus. And I have faith in the American people on this Sunday morning. I hope and pray we have a vaccine and that it will be soon, but it must be safe and efficacious when we do, not one day sooner, not one day later than that. But the fact is, this administration has been a total failure in protecting the health and well-being of the American people, and it has had an impact on our economy. The lives, the livelihood, and the life of our democracy are threatened by this administration. So again, when people say, what can I do? You can vote, you can get out the vote, and you can do so as soon as possible. 10 states, as I said, on Friday started their early voting the day that we lost Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
But to be clear, you're not taking any arrows out of your quiver. You're not ruling anything out.
Good morning. Sunday morning. We have a responsibility. We take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. We have a responsibility to meet the needs of the American people. When we weigh the equities, protecting our democracy requires us to use every arrow in our quiver.
And finally, if the Republicans, though, still are successful, many of your colleagues have called for, again, if a majority is voted for Democrats in November, expanding the court in retaliation. Your response?
Well, let's just win the election. Let's hope that the president will see the light. Again, there's many, many people in our country, and millions more now because of the coronavirus, who have a pre-existing medical condition. The president has not been truthful in what he has said about that. He is in court to crush the pre-existing condition as he crushes the Affordable Care Act instead of crushing the virus. So people have something at stake in this decision and how quickly the president wants to go. I don't think they care about who said what, when, and all the rest of that, but they do care about their own health and well-being and the financial health and well-being of their families if they are subjected to unlimited costs because of a pre-existing condition, as well as eliminating the caps that have been placed by the Affordable Care Act on what insurance companies can charge. So this is about the people. It's about their health, their economic well-being, the health of our democracy. We have a great deal at stake here. I think we should be very calm. We should be inspired by Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was brilliant, and she was strategic, and she was successful. And she did more for equality for women in our country than anyone that you can name. And the women appreciate that, and I think that you will see women weighing in on all of these decisions, be they elections, confirmations, or the rest.
Madam Speaker, thanks very much for your time this morning.
So you see there Nancy Pelosi doing a good job both of activating women because there's, of course, a great gender gap in the vote for Biden versus Trump. Biden has, like a 29-30% gender gap in terms of women who are in favor of Biden versus Trump. But I also think in that clip you saw Nancy Pelosi focus in on what is one of the most important issues for Democrats in this election. If you look at the entire interview at a link down in the video description, if you click on that link to ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, you'll see Nancy Pelosi started her interview response to George Stephanopoulos talking about healthcare. Healthcare is probably the healthcare and the coronavirus crisis are the two topics Democrats should keep talking about over and over again for the next, 46 days until the election. That is the one positive for Trump from the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, is that it gives him some topic to talk about other than coronavirus and his failure on coronavirus, and also healthcare. A week after the November 3rd election, the Supreme Court has ACA, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, on the docket for the Supreme Court to consider. The third Supreme Court challenge to Obamacare, and the lower court has decided that Obamacare is unconstitutional, and now there are only 8 justices, and if there is a 4-4 tie in the Supreme Court, that means the lower court decision stands. So, like on November 10th, there may be a case heard in the Supreme Court that actually strikes down Obamacare, gets rid of protections for pre-existing conditions, and that's something Nancy Pelosi talked about in that clip I just showed you. It's something she talked about at the beginning of her interview with George Stephanopoulos, and the healthcare issue, the fact that Trump has promised over and over again to come up with something, he's going to repeal Obamacare and replace it with something much better that costs so much less, and that's pretty much all the details you ever hear, and that is a huge Republican and Trump failure, and that is an issue Democrats should hammer to the electorate every day, 46 days, every one of those 46 days between now and November 3rd, and so kudos to Nancy Pelosi for pointing that out. And the one other thing I wanted to point out is that if after the election, when the Republicans hopefully have lost the presidency and lost the Senate, if they try to confirm some Trump nominee to replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg at that point, well, maybe what George Stephanopoulos asked Nancy Pelosi would be important at that point, because impeachment under Senate rules gets priority. So if the House impeaches Trump or impeaches Bill Barr, that would be something the Senate has to take up, and they might run out of days to even have a vote on Trump's nominee to the Supreme Court. So that's the final point I wanted to make on the topic of RIP RBG. But I do have a few other news clips here on the topic of the coronavirus crisis update, where you'll see that the number of deaths in the United States have gotten to 200,000. Well, over 200,000 on NBC, but just under 200,000 on CBS. I'm not sure why, but I will start with the NBC News summary, just 45 seconds, where this is like 45 minutes into NBC News' Meet the Press. They finally pointed out that coronavirus is a huge topic. Over 200,000 Americans have died, and Trump, his leadership has made things worse, as you can see in this NBC News Meet the Press news summary on that topic over here.
Welcome back. Lost in all the news about Justice Ginsburg was the fact that confirmed deaths in the United States from the coronavirus sadly hit 200,000 officially yesterday, and with roughly 40,000 new cases a day, the administration still seems to be arguing with itself. Last week, President Trump contradicted his own CDC director on the timeline for a vaccine and on the value of face masks. And we also learned that the White House scuttled a plan to deliver 650 million face masks to hard-hit areas in the spring because at the time they thought it was going to create panic. And there was a report that looser guidelines for testing that were written by Health and Human Service officials over the objections of CDC scientists, though those guidelines were reversed on Friday after a couple of those officials have been dismissed. So joining me now is the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Alex.
So that's the NBC News Meet the Press news summary on COVID-19 deaths in the United States going over 200,000. And one of the weird things about COVID-19 I've noticed is if you go to different sources, you get different death numbers. And that's kind of shown in this CBS News Face the Nation news summary. It starts with Margaret Brennan talking about the number of deaths, and it's actually slightly under 200,000, even though it's a Sunday program that ran basically at the same time as Meet the Press, but we're slightly under that amount. And then Margaret Brennan goes to Marc Strassman, who's been hanging out in Atlanta for many, many months. If you've been watching my show over the last several months, you know that Marc Strassman is hoping to get a interview with someone at the CDC. You saw in that last news clip, Chuck Todd talked about how Trump has been at odds with the CDC, but that doesn't come up so much in this last news summary. Face the Nation, both talking about almost 200,000 COVID-19 deaths, how it's affecting the polls and the voting over in this clip.
We're facing new grim milestones in the COVID-19 pandemic. In the U.S., there have been 6.8 million cases, and we are about to reach 200,000 deaths. Worldwide, cases stand at just short of 31 million, and the number of deaths is approaching 1 million. CBS News national correspondent Marc Strassman is in Atlanta.
Can you believe after 6 months, Mother, that we are sitting here together?
Keep your distance. It's the new American way.
Howdy, folks. This is Big Tex.
And the Texas State Fair. We're wary, despite months of rosy reassurances.
One day it's like a miracle. It will disappear. It is going to disappear.
But in America's COVID chronicle, family sorrows are not going away.
Donald Trump insists that he wouldn't have done anything differently.
You can track COVID's impact on the presidential race. Take Florida and Texas, big players on the electoral map that Mr. Trump won in 2016, run by Republican governors, and now former COVID hotspots doing better with the virus. According to our battleground tracker, so is President Trump.
The number of active cases of COVID in the state of Texas has been cut more than half since July.
Just like former Vice President Biden's lead in Florida. He's up 2 points today. In July, he was up 6. During the same time frame in Texas, President Trump's lead over Mr. Biden grew from 1 point to 2. As goes the virus, so it seems, goes the race. Yeah, it looks like it's missing. But the clock's running out on corona politics. Early voters have started heading to the polls or have already voted by mail. In all, 7 states have begun accepting in-person voting. 2 more will follow suit in the next week. And 23 states have started accepting mail-in ballots. Millions of polarized Americans agree. Why wait?
Without the long lines, without the long wait, and plus you can already rest assured that your vote is already in.
In many states, voters who want an early ballot have to give a good reason. In a handful of states, listing the pandemic is not considered a valid reason. Big surprise, the issue is now in the courts. COVID America is a tough place to find consensus. Margaret?
Mark, thanks. For a look at the COVID-19 situation.
Oh, and after that, CBS News' Face the Nation actually goes to Elizabeth Palmer, who reports on the effect of COVID-19, not just on the United States, but around the world. And especially, she reports on how the number 2 country is now India, where things are not going great in terms of COVID-19. And that's worth watching. And by the way, if you click on a link down in the video description to CBS News' Face the Nation, you will be taken to the Face the Nation YouTube channel, where pretty much the entire show is split up into segments you can watch free on YouTube, including Elizabeth Palmer's report about what's going on internationally on COVID-19. But the last clip I want to show you is actually more surprising than the last 2 clips where CBS and NBC report on how bad things are going in terms of COVID-19, whether it's a little under 200,000 according to CBS or over 200,000 according to NBC, and in terms of US deaths. This next clip is something you wouldn't expect to see on Fox News if you've read The Loudest Voice in the Room by Gabriel Sherman, that explains how Fox News is just a propaganda arm of the Republican Party. But I've also said occasionally journalism is incidentally committed on the Fox News channel, and here you see Chris Wallace having a discussion with Bill Gates, where Bill Gates explains how the Trump administration was a huge failure. Trump failed big time when it comes to the response to COVID-19 in terms of not only testing at the beginning of this clip, but eventually one of the things you hear Trump all the time say, well, I instituted the China ban, the China travel ban, and everyone admits I saved millions of lives with the China travel ban, and that is totally refuted by Bill Gates in this final news clip on Fox News Sunday of all places, that I will talk about with you after we watch it together over here.
You say that ever since you were a teenager, you've tackled a new problem the same way. You ask who is handling it well and what can you learn from them. So, direct question, how well has the U.S. handled the coronavirus?
Well, unfortunately, we did a very poor job, and you can just see that in the numbers if you compare the Asian countries like South Korea and Australia. The key was getting the testing going. What happened was that 40,000 people came out of China because we didn't ban the residents and citizens from coming in. So we created this rush, and we didn't have the ability to test or quarantine those people. And so that seeded the disease here. The ban probably accelerated that the way it was executed. And we just didn't go to the commercial providers and get the tests ready. The FDA made it harder. And so even today, people don't get their results in 24 hours, which it's outrageous that we still have that.
I just want to pick up on that. You're saying that the travel bans made the situation worse, not better?
Yeah, so when you have people realize that the flights are going to start to get canceled, and if they don't, the citizens and residents, if they don't come back right away, you get a rush. And that's where you really need to do like South Korea, Australia did, where you take those people and you test them. And if you can't test them, you put them in quarantine. If they test positive, you put them in quarantine. We didn't do that. We didn't have any community testing. We didn't have the scale of testing, which would have required the commercial providers. And so that meant that March saw this incredible explosion, the West Coast coming from China, and then the East Coast coming out of Europe. And so even though we'd seen China and we'd seen Europe, that testing capacity and clear message of how to behave wasn't there. And that's, led to us having not just a bad spring. We've had a pretty tough summer. And sadly, because of the seasonality, until we get these new tools, the fall's looking to shape up as pretty tough as well. I do think, we need to own up to the fact that we didn't do a good job. Part of the reluctance, I think, to fix the testing system now is that nobody wants to admit that it's still outrageous that the access to the test, depending on the more wealthy get access, and you have these delays where you're not seeing the answer within 24 hours, which that should not be the case. The U.S. has more of these machines, more of this capacity than other countries by a huge amount. And so partly the reimbursement system is creating perverse incentive. But, looking back, my main focus now is let's get the tools right, and let's get the testing right now. We will have time to look at those mistakes, which in February and March were really super unfortunate. But, we can't pretend like we get a good grade even today.
Finally, I want to end.
So I thought that was a pretty brutal critique of the Trump administration on both testing and the China travel ban that I was pleased to see actually aired on the Fox News channel. So I guess that is an argument in favor of Chris Wallace being a supposedly straight news anchor. So I wanted to show you that. And before I finish the program, I do want to thank the people who I talked about, some of the Super Chat contributors along the way, but here's a screenshot of all of the Super Chat contributors during the show. So I appreciate all of that, and I did promise a bonus Dash and Sandy clip, a Dandy clip for the Dandy fans out there, and I think somewhere in the past I've shown a clip of Dash showing why we call Dash Conversation Boy, and this, I got a clip of Dash and Sandy in front of the food bowls when I fed Sandy the dog this morning. Sandy is the dog, Dash is the cat, but at some point I thought off camera I might try to mew at Dash to see if Dash would respond, because Dash is the conversation boy. When you mew at him, you get a mew in response. And here is the Dash and Sandy clip to end the show tonight over here. So, did I prove my point? Is Dash the conversation boy? You heard me mewing off camera and getting responses from Dash, and of course Sandy in the background for the Sandy fans eating her breakfast. Excuse me for misgendering the puppy. But anyway, that is the final clip for the show tonight. I don't think I will be doing any videos during the week this week because I have a whole bunch of ACLU commitments. I will be back next Sunday with my live clip roundup, and then I hopefully will be doing a debate clip roundup after the September 29th debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. If there are Senate Judiciary Committee hearings on a Trump nominee to the Supreme Court, I might do a live clip roundup of all that. But until then, or until next week, and I appreciate all of my live stream viewers commenting along the way, especially those super chat contributors, and also at a link down in the video description you can become a monthly patron on Patreon. You can give me a one-time PayPal contribution, or also there's a join button for people who have YouTube accounts. You can become a YouTube member of my YouTube channel. Those are all the ways you can support me financially, or you can just watch my videos, share them on social media, give me a supportive comment, and especially for the recorded show viewers. And anyway, that's the end of the show. I hope you appreciate the 8 to 10 hours I spent this Sunday and every Sunday for the last 387 Sundays. That's like 7+ years of Sundays. And until next Sunday, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.